that. We work to raise awareness on child sexual abuse prevention, and our goal is to empower parents and to motivate them and give them the tools and knowledge needed in order to minimize risks. So I have been with the Mama Bear Effect for about 5 years, and I'm happy to be here today. We are in collaboration with the Family Resource Network in New York, which is a really exciting collaboration. So I'll turn it over to Adrienne to introduce herself, and then we'll get started. Oh, you're on mute.
I was on mute and I was trying to put it on YouTube, so it was having a delay. I could hear the YouTube and you, and I was totally thrown off. But it's live on YouTube, so hopefully I'll get it shared on Facebook so people on social media can also tune in from there. But yeah, my name is Adrienne Simeone. I founded the Mama Bear Effect in 2012. I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, but I have a background in marketing and entrepreneurship, and I just kind of fell down the proverbial rabbit hole and learned how prevalent child sexual abuse was. And as a mother of two at the time, I now have four. I just realized that there actually is a lot of great information that we as parents should have access to and should be able to learn about this issue. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make this information accessible to parents. So a lot of our work is done through our educational website, which is completely free, social media, free downloads, and we do a lot of collaborations with child advocacy centers and organizations like the Family Resource Network, which co-hosted this training with us today. So thank you so much to Michelle and everyone over at the Family Resource Network for all the amazing work that you guys do, educating your community and working to raise awareness to prevent child sexual abuse and help children grow up to live healthy, safe lives free from trauma. So this is a 1.5 hour, an hour to an hour and a half webinar. We're going to hopefully have some time for questions. You will be able to message Natalie and I during the training. Both of us will be monitoring the chat. And I'm going to let Natalie kick off the training for today. This is a new training that we've been doing for, gosh, Nat, about almost a year now.
Yeah, I think so.
People had been asking us for a long time to do live trainings, and I think between my kids getting older and Natalie going through all of her kids stuff, we finally found the time to sit down in front of the computer and do some of these trainings live. And so we're looking forward to all the feedback that you can give us so that we can continue to strengthen this training and make it as impactful as possible. So I'll turn it back to you, Natalie.
Sounds great. I'm excited. Okay, so I'll share my screen and get going on the training. Like Adrienne said, feel free to message us in the chat if you have any questions as we go along. We will save time for a Q&A session at the end. So we probably won't be able to answer questions throughout the training, but we would like to answer them at the end. So please feel free to put them in the chat so we don't forget what those questions are. So this training is specifically for parents, but it can also be applicable to any professionals who might be on the call. Like I mentioned before, the goal is to empower rather than to frighten. We're hoping that by giving you some more knowledge and tools in your tool belt, that you'll walk away feeling more motivated and enlightened. So we are calling this training, it's called the Rock the Talk. This one is for beginners, and we are going to talk about protecting children from sexual abuse. So some ground rules for the presentation. We aren't going to be sharing any graphic content. However, it is still a triggering topic, understandably so. So if you need to take a break and put us on mute or walk away, there's no shame in doing that. We also put some support hotlines on the slide here if you want to take a screenshot, just so you can know who you can reach out to after if you have anything personal or serious that you need to get off your chest and talk with a professional about. So our goals today, these are our 5 main goals. We want to help you walk away with more courage and confidence and to have a better understanding of this topic and what steps to take to minimize risk. We also want to talk about what you can talk about with your children and how to phrase things and word things. And we also want to talk about preparing for and creating opportunities for disclosure. This is not something that a lot of trainings cover, so we're happy to be talking about it today because it is important. We want to touch on the importance of helping our children feel safe and comfortable coming to you about anything, whether it's just something inappropriate or something seriously concerning. So before we can talk about how to prevent sexual abuse and what those logistics look like, we do want to talk about some basic definitions. Of course, we can get more specific, but in general, child sexual abuse is someone physically touching a child, or it doesn't involve touching either. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it can involve physical touch with or without clothes, and also encouraging a child to touch their own body in a sexual way. We have seen offenders even encouraging children to touch each other and to take pictures and videos. That is still considered sexual abuse. Abuse can involve no touching as well. So an offender may take or share sexually explicit nude photos or videos of children. They may expose their body to a child or introduce the child to pornography. And like I mentioned before, they may encourage children to do things with each other and capture videos of that, which would be called child sexual abuse material. And generally, according to most laws in each state, I think it depends on each state, but in general, the age difference, according to the law of sexual abuse, is 3 or more, like a 3 years or more age gap between the victim and the offender. And we want to bring this up because we'll talk today about how there is a such thing as child-on-child sexual abuse. We tend to think it's just between a child and an adult, but unfortunately it can happen between youth as well. And that is a little bit different, but we'll talk about that as we move forward through the training. So the prevalence of child sexual abuse is unfortunately high. For girls, we're seeing that 1 in 4 girls are experiencing child sexual abuse. And depending on the research or the literature that you look at, for boys, it's either 1 in 6 to 1 in 13. But either way, it's still too high. Children with disabilities, such as intellectual disabilities, they may need and require more adults in their life to be taking care of them, such as therapists and coaches and teachers and resource teachers, etc. So because they may require more adults in their life and more resources, this is increasing the chances of being exposed to an unsafe person or a predator. And so that's why they have an 80 to 90% likelihood of experiencing child sexual abuse. Once again, we share these numbers not to scare you, but just having a knowledge of how serious and prevalent this is can help us understand how important it is to put steps in place with our children and everybody in their life. I'll turn it over to Adrian.
Okay. So, I think one of the most interesting things that we have learned and the research has shown over the years is that when children experience trauma during their childhood, for a long time, they felt like it was just bad memories. It was things that happened in their life that they needed to work through and just forget about and move on. But now we know, basically for the past, oh gosh, 15, 20 years, that there is a biological correlation to the trauma and stress that is put on children when they are experiencing sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse during their childhood. So some of those symptoms may come out in ways that we may not expect. A lot of kids may suffer from things like anxiety. They may have more regular headaches, experience depression, panic attacks. A lot of these kids will actually be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder because the impact of the trauma was that significant on their body. A lot of these kids will actually struggle with identity disorders. They will feel dissociated from their bodies. They'll have mood disorders. Sometimes there may be increased likelihood of multiple personality disorders because their brain is trying to process how to live a life living with the memories of that trauma that is in their body. We also know because stress affects the developing body of a child, their neurological system, and actually their brain, that impacts their growth. So children also have increased rates of having digestive tract issues. So when we think about kids who have, irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease, things like that, some of those symptoms can actually be a result of the chronic stress that has been put on their body. People who have experienced continuous trauma during their childhood are also increased likelihood to experience higher rates of heart disease, diabetes, increased rates of being diagnosed with autoimmune disorders, dermatological issues. A lot of kids have things like eczema can actually be a symptom of trauma because of the impact on the body. Then, of course, increased rates of cancer as well because of that level of stress that's been the levels of cortisol that can be rushing through their body, and their body never gets a chance to relax and reset. They're in a constant state of stress. And so that's putting a lot of pressure on a number of parts of a child's developing body. So, for a long time, child sexual abuse was something that people really didn't talk about, especially publicly. And so, one of the main stories that came out a long time ago that kind of broke the silence on this issue was Miss America, um, during like the 1950s or 60s. I can't remember what year it was, but when she was a older adult, she came out to share her story that she was a survivor of incest. And I think this is a really important story because so often people think of the issues of child sexual abuse as something that happens in bad families where there are neglectful parents. Obviously they're under a certain, poverty level or whatever. But it can happen in any family. It doesn't matter how loving or how great a family is. It can still happen in any family. So I love this quote from her because she says, "We had all the trappings of a perfect family: wealth, social status, a handsome father, and a lovely mother. And yet this was happening in her home." And so I think it's important for us to remember that sometimes the most perfect looking homes can have abuse occurring within them, but because there's this facade that everything looks happy, people would never suspect it. So we should never assume that anybody has this perfect life or that they're immune from being sexually abused because of their circumstances within their family or their communities. Whoops, did you click the link, Natalie? There used to be a link on the slide that went directly to the article, but I guess um, it's not functioning anymore. But so this is something that kind of sets the Mama Bear apart from other organizations and other messages about preventing child sexual abuse, is that in, the 13 years that we've been doing this work, actually almost 14 years now, we can give you all the information you need to keep your children safe. But if we as individuals, as parents, as responsible adults, don't have the courage to do what is necessary to keep kids safe, then it doesn't matter what we know or we don't know. So this information is only as useful as we are comfortable putting it to use. So what we have, dived into or, drove into a little bit more is we want to help you build courage. And so this is something that I had actually kind of put together my own. And then I found this framework that aligned perfectly with what I had learned, is that in order for us to have courage, there are three key things that we need to accomplish. One, we need to have competence. We have to understand the situation so that we can be prepared. So just like if there was a battle or if there was a sports game, people need to understand what to expect. They have to understand the enemy. They have to understand the landscape. They have to understand what strengths and weaknesses they have within their family or their organization so that they can be prepared to address them. And then from there, you have to have confidence. And we gain confidence by going through experiences that are probably going to be a little uncomfortable. So it might be having a conversation. Like I said, having good knowledge of the situation so that when you're talking about something, you can feel confident that you have a solid, firm framework to lean against. And then as we have these types of conversations, whether it's with our family members, coworkers, other parents, or even with our own children, we start to realize that yes, we can talk about this, that we need to talk about this, and that the discomfort of talking about it is actually one of the biggest hurdles that keeps kids at risk. So the more we talk about it, the more experience that we get having these types of conversations or speaking up when we see something that doesn't feel right, we gain confidence. We feel more comfortable in our own skin and ready to speak up the next time that that happens. I'll say to people all the times, learning about this work has turned me into a lightning rod because now I see so many things that I need to speak out against or for, and I can't not be silent. So I've turned into a big pain in the butt for a lot of people, but it's at the for the benefit of children, hopefully. And then lastly is commitment. So we need to make a commitment to ourselves, for our families, about what our limitations are. If we're committed to keeping kids safe, then that means the comfort of other people comes second to the safety of children, because so often people will put the comfort of others before the safety of children because they don't want to make someone uncomfortable. They don't want to offend anybody. They don't want to bring up this topic and be the person who's always talking about things that make other people feel uncomfortable. If we make the commitment to keep kids safe, then we need to stick by that commitment. And so when we understand that for ourselves or for an organization or for a family, it makes it easier for us to do what we need to do. And even better, if we have people with us that are also prepared to be committed with us. So whether it's our spouse, our parents or siblings, our coworkers, the more people who are on board with us, the easier it is for us to say, no, I know I need to do this because I know Natalie would totally be behind me and I feel totally confident that I'm doing the right thing. And I know whatever I go through, if someone gives me a hard time, I can at least go to Natalie and I can talk about it and say, oh, this was terrible, but I know I did the right thing. And she's going to say, yes, you did. So those are the three key components, and we're going to kind of touch upon them as we go along because I want everyone to understand how these impact different stages and different aspects of protecting children from sexual abuse. So when it comes to child sexual abuse, and I know Natalie went over some of the statistics, and when we talk about statistics, of course, there are no factual, 100% accurate statistics out there that are going to tell us exactly how many children right now are experiencing sexual abuse or 100% who the perpetrators are and and exactly how child sexual abuse occurs. It can occur in so many different fashions that there is no one way that I can say, if you just avoid this, you're going to keep children safe. We know over and over again from so much of the research, the vast majority of people who perpetrate child sexual abuse are people known and trusted by the child and often by their family. So these may be people who were even connected to the parents of that child before that child was even born. A significant portion of those people are family members, which makes sense because family members often have the most access to children. So it's people living within the same home or they spend significant time with the family. People who have access to children are obviously going to have increased opportunity to commit sexual abuse. We also know, and this has been a changing number, initially when we started this work, it was about 35 to 40% of perpetrators were estimated to be other children. Now, with the rise of smart devices and exposure to pornography and the internet, it's up to 70% or more of child sexual abuse is being perpetrated by juveniles. So now, even more than ever, it's important for parents and adults and people who work with children to be aware of these issues, to be vigilant for signs of abuse, and to communicate with children about what's appropriate and respectful behavior between one another. We also know with the increased rates of online perpetrated sexual abuse that there has been growing numbers of people who are known to the child using the internet to groom and abuse children. So it could be a family member, a teacher, a coach, a peer who uses texting, social media, gaming, email, video conferencing as a way to groom a child, control the child, sexually abuse and exploit that child. So when we first, started catching on to the online perpetrated abuse, a lot of that was considered the new stranger danger, but now we can't even say that. So even when we have a child who has a phone and all their contacts are their family and friends and whoever else, people that we know, that doesn't mean that they are completely safe from being exploited through that device or through the internet. So it's a changing landscape and it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep kids safe because of the access to the internet and devices. We also know that the media does really not represent the reality of child sexual abuse. Most of the cases that we'll see on the news oftentimes represent, a stranger situation or a teacher or a coach. Oftentimes there's significant physical evidence that brought these cases forth. We know that most sexual abuse is not even reported by people until they're into their adult years. So we're never going to see the real reality when they're talking about it in the news or even in movies and TV and things things like that. And so as a result of these things, there is really a limited public awareness. And of course, there's limited access to education for parents and everyday people to learn about this issue. So it's amazing and it's great that you guys are all here today and tuning in. You are going to face a community, a family of people who are not on the same page as you and don't have that awareness, which is why you are now granted with the responsibility and the opportunity to educate the people that you know in your lives, because now you have knowledge and awareness that they don't have. So this is a really complex issue. There's no perfect way to address it, but we're adults, we're prepared to be responsible and address what we need to do to keep kids safe from sexual abuse. So, when we're thinking about what are some of the reasons why people don't understand the reality of child sexual abuse, or some of the misconceptions that they put in their head, because the reality is people don't want to feel vulnerable. They don't want to be at risk. So sometimes there are things that people will say to themselves in order for them to feel more comfortable not addressing this. So we'll hear people say things like, well, I only allow my kids to go around people I trust. Which, granted, that's a great idea. Of course, we don't want to be just allowing anybody to have access to our children, but that's not a guaranteed way to keep them safe, because as we said, the vast majority of people who perpetrate sexual abuse are known by the child and family and in a position of trust. A lot of people assume that their child would tell them. I saw some article a couple weeks ago, and a lot of people were saying, well, if the parents were good parents, their child would have told them. And that's a pretty terrible responsibility to put on parents, that they can somehow empower their child enough to guarantee that they would tell. We should never assume that our child would automatically tell us. We should absolutely be prepared that maybe they want to disclose that to someone else and give children opportunities, but never assume that our child would come to us right away, or that, again, the third one, that we would be able to tell. Some children do an amazing job of looking perfect because they don't want people to know what's happening to them, because a lot of times kids know there's going to be consequences for having that abuse come to light, and they oftentimes will even protect their own parents and families from that reality. And then the last one, which is actually pretty common, is that people assume that if children are near other people, that a person would not risk perpetrating sexual abuse. They think it happens in situations of isolation, where they drive a child far away into the woods and they sexually assault them in a car. But the reality is it can happen in a classroom with other people nearby, or in a daycare, or even within a home. Oftentimes, family gatherings can be a point where there is increased risk of abuse, because it really doesn't take much for someone to assault a child, or take a picture inappropriately of a child, or do something sexually abusive to a child, even when there are people nearby. So it's important for us to think, what are some of the misconceptions we might have in our heads, or the misconceptions other people that we know may have in their heads, so that we can be prepared to empathize with them, because we understand that comes from a perception of they don't want to, experience this. But what can we do to empower ourselves, to strengthen ourselves and the people that we know, to face the reality of this issue? So I think this is my last slide, right, Natalie? So when we're talking about primary prevention means focusing on preventing child sexual abuse from occurring in the first place. A lot of prevention of child sexual abuse is often focused on responding to abuse that has already happened. When we talk about primary prevention, we want to do the most that we can to keep children safe from experiencing abuse in the first place. So ultimately, it is an adult responsibility. And when I say responsibility, I do not mean by any means, shape, or form that is the fault of parents if their child is sexually abused. We take responsibility for lots of things. So we have this image here of the family in the car. So this is just like a good analogy for it. When we are driving in a car, we cannot prevent every accident from happening, but there are things that we can do to reduce risk of an accident. So we buckle ourselves in. We make sure we put our child in an appropriate seat and that they're buckled in. We keep our eyes on the road. We drive defensively. Okay. So there are things that we can be doing that is taking responsibility for safety. But if someone rear ends us, there's not so much that we can do about that if we get T-boned, but we want to do the most that we can to keep kids safe. So that's what we mean by responsibility and primary prevention, is that we're going to take this mentality of this is precious cargo. I want to keep my child safe. I'm going to do everything I can to keep them safe. So when we're thinking about this as a family issue, what works best is when parents work together. If there's one parent, oftentimes, let's be real, it's the mom who is kind of given the responsibility of child safety. The dad might feel like, this isn't anything I need to really worry about. Or grandparents might feel like, oh, well, this isn't anything that's going to affect my family, or aunts and uncles, people like that. But when a whole family of adults is educated and they work together, it's really amazing how it can change the culture of a family. So when you have multiple children, and I have four, so I will say kids give you plenty of material to work with. It's important to look at the sibling dynamic. Is there a bullying situation going on? What is the age difference with the kids? How do they interact with each other? Is the older sibling respectful to the younger siblings? Look at that relationship and see if it's a nurturing relationship, or are there factors in their relationship and their behaviors that might want you to pay more attention and increase supervision of the kids. Like I said before, engaging extended family. Grandparents are an amazing, amazing resource to support messaging of parents. So a parent might say, I can't let you go into this situation because I don't think that they're prioritizing safety. A grandparent may jump on board and say, I agree with this. This is something that's really important. Sometimes kids listen to things a little bit better when it comes from a grandparent than it does from their own parents. But also caregivers. So if you're bringing someone in to be a babysitter, or you used childcare, working with them so that they are also promoting similar language and safety measures to keep kids safe. And then, of course, too, as I mentioned before, excuse me, when we're having gatherings and parties and family dinners, those are opportunities where children can be isolated rather quickly. So thinking about, not letting kids play in behind closed doors. There might be certain areas of the house that you want off limits. Maybe it's the basement, maybe it's the attic, checking in. Those are situations that can increase risk. And then, of course, play dates and sleepovers. Someone had said recently that sleepovers is something that a lot of influencers saying they don't do because they want to prioritize safety of children. And I think that's great if that's the rule that you want to have. But let's not forget that play dates can also increase risk of sexual abuse when a child is in a home if there's not sufficient supervision going on. So when we think about the fact that the majority of sexual abuse occurs by people known to the child, a significant portion of it happening by someone related to that child, safety within the home really needs to be a priority, and we need to educate ourselves and take responsibility of the fact that yes, it could happen under our roof, and what is it that we need to do and will do to keep children safe within our home. So I'm going to pass it back to Natalie to cover the next slides.
Perfect. So, continuing on with this idea of primary prevention, one of the first things that we can start today, if we haven't already, is modeling appropriate behavior so that our children understand how they should be treated, and hopefully they will recognize what will be inappropriate if they are growing up in a home where there is appropriate behavior, if that makes sense. So children really benefit when adults promote and uphold appropriate behavior. So here are some examples. Most of us would agree with all these things, but it's still important to go over. The way that we communicate with our children and their friends needs to be age appropriate. I only have a 6 and a 1-year-old, so I can only give examples off of those ages. But when my son is over with his other 6-year-old friends, it would not be appropriate for me to talk about them kissing their crushes, right? It's not appropriate for 6-year-olds to talk about kissing, so therefore I should not be talking about that either. When we're at a big family gathering and our teenage daughter or teenage son is at that gathering with us, it would be inappropriate for an aunt or uncle to talk about and initiate sexual jokes with them, or to talk about sex or topics like that that really should be between the parents and the teenagers. So we need to be modeling appropriate communication and teaching our children what would not be appropriate so they would know to tell you if they experience something inappropriate. We also need to teach and promote privacy. So some examples would be knocking on bathroom and bedroom doors before entering, and encouraging our children to do the same, especially if they have siblings or friends over. We need to respect boundaries. So a lot of, people are already talking about this on social media, but it's worth going over again. If a child says no to a touch, we need to respect that and teach others to respect that as well, and really empower our children to say no and to know that they're allowed to say no. Okay, so this is also another thing that we can take away from today. So if you're able to screenshot this, please do so. You can also email me or Adrian. I put our emails in the chat, and we can send you a PDF with a worksheet to help you build a family code of conduct. So this is your first homework today. Go home after this training today, tomorrow, and if you have a partner or a spouse, please go over it with them as well and create your family code of conduct. This is how you want your family to function. This should be a dynamic and a culture. This is not something that you should put in place and then forget about it. It needs to be a way of living. But your family code of conduct is a great way to keep people safe within your home as best as possible. And it's also something you can share with your friends. So if your children are going to somebody else's house for a play date, or a sleepover, if that's what you decide to do, you can go over some of these rules that you live by as a family to make sure that others are keeping them as well and keeping your kids feeling safe. So there's 6 main points. We'll go over some of them. Like I said, please take notes, and we are happy to send this PDF to you afterwards. But we have privacy, respectful behaviors, secrets, bodily autonomy, supervision, and playdates or sleepovers. So I want you to decide with your spouse or partner how you want your family to live according to these things. So for example, we'll just go through a few. With privacy, what rules do you need to put in place in your home right now to ensure that everybody is practicing and keeping privacy and respecting others' privacy? So for example, do you need to put a rule in place that there needs to be knocking before opening doors? Maybe you need to put a rule in place that you are not allowed to take pictures of others unless you get a yes or a no. Um, Another big one that I really encourage parents, as cute as it is to see your little kids in the bathtub, please do not take pictures of them naked. And please don't share them. That would be probably the most important piece, is not sharing or posting pictures of your children in the bathtub. That's a popular picture. I know that my scrapbooks from my childhood have lots of those bath time pictures. It's understandable. But that we want to respect our children's privacy. They're not allowed to, if they're that young, they can't consent to a naked picture being taken of them. So that's something to consider. We'll go to secrets. Secrets. So that is something that an offender uses to instill and maintain a bond with their victim. So that's why we teach parents to teach their children that instead of using the term secrets, we teach our children that they can do surprises. Because a surprise is a little different than a secret. A surprise is something that you will share eventually. So if you want to surprise your husband with a birthday present from your children, you would tell them not to keep a secret, but instead this is a surprise. We are going to tell dad later when we surprise him with the gift. But you also want to remind your children that if anybody at school or wherever they're at tries to ask them to keep a secret, your child has the ability and should feel empowered enough to say, no, I actually don't do secrets. And you want your children to feel safe coming to you and telling you if someone is asking them to keep a secret, especially if it's a very concerning or inappropriate one. Let's see. We've talked about a lot of these things. We'll go to supervision. So make some rules for your family code of conduct as to how you want to ensure supervision within your house. I know with my young kids, we've already started the rule of having doors open when they play with friends. And I always share that rule with others when my child goes over to somebody else's house for a play date. the other parent has always been receptive to that, and they've always said, yes, definitely, doors will be open. That is a great rule to have in place with any age of your children. We've mentioned smart devices and internet use and how it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if your children are at that age where they do have a smart device and they are using the internet, I highly, highly encourage you to make some rules as to how you're going to keep that supervised. So some families will have a family computer in the dining room or in the living room that anybody can use because it's out in the open. Some families have made rules that if their child is going to use their smart device, that they cannot do it in a room that is shut. The doors need to be open so that there's still some supervision there. Some families have made the rule that at nighttime their children need to turn in their phones so that they're not using the phone behind a closed door at night and in the dark. That's kind of a recipe for danger. So consider some of those rules for your own. And then lastly, we've touched on playdates versus sleepovers. This is a personal thing per family. I know that I have some family members who have older kids and different age dynamics, and cousins are really, really close and they want to have sleepovers. And I understand it gets tricky depending on your family dynamics and ages. So do what you feel is right for your family. But if you are going to allow sleepovers, I would set some rules in place as to how you're going to ensure a lot of supervision, especially while everybody is sleeping. So I just kind of ran over a few of these, but I hope that you all have taken a screenshot or taken notes. We're happy to send a PDF afterwards, but this is your first piece of homework to go home and create a family code of conduct.
Natalie, I did put it in
Yes,
the chat for everybody too. So
thank
it's
you.
in there if they want to
Okay,
click in there.
that's easier. Yeah. And I was going to say, after you create this family code of conduct, it's really important to go over it with your children so that they are on the same page and continually remind them and review it. I like to put mine on our fridge where everyone can see, and I like to share it with people who enter our home. And I know that sounds weird. It doesn't have to be weird to share this with people who come into your home. A few years ago, I had a friend who was hosting a dinner with a lot of families at her house. And when she was texting us about food assignments, at the end of the text, she also said, "Oh, and also here are our family safety rules. I ask that you respect these A, B, C, D, E." And it wasn't weird. It was natural. So it's something that we can share with others without having to make it weird. So after you've created your family code of conduct, after your family is familiar with it and it's somewhere for all to see, we really, really encourage you to talk about a body safety circle with your children. This is a really cool concept. So a body safety circle is 3 to 5 adults in your child's life that you and your child both agree are safe people they can go to if they can't go to you. Now, these 3 to 5 adults, you really do need to trust them. And in addition to that, beyond that, you need to have a conversation with them about your family code of conduct and gauge their response. If they are respectful and just as passionate about child safety as you are, that is a great indicator that they are a safe person to have in your close circle. So initiate a discussion with them. Talk to them about your awareness regarding abuse and how you just attended this training. You can even give them our information since we do offer trainings regularly. They can attend one for themselves. You want to talk with them about you want to prioritize safe situations and you want to model appropriate behaviors and you want to work with them and have them on your side to help keep an extra eye on your child. The reality of the matter is it, like Adrian kind of hinted at before, it's not entirely possible to put 100% of the responsibility on your shoulders to keep your children safe. That is the goal. That's what we're trying to do. But you do need people in your corner and in your village to help you out as well. And your child, they may need other people in their circle if they can't go to you for some reason. So a body safety circle is a really great way to do this. So after you've picked those people with your child, it's important to have a discussion with those adults next and make sure that they are on the same page as you. Really, the whole point of this is the foundation of all of these things that we are teaching is we want to empower our children. We want them to know that they are special, they are important, they are loved, and they deserve goodness and they deserve respect. We have this really awesome downloadable poster. I think it's downloadable, right, Adrian? And yes, and it is. And you can also purchase it for a really great cost as well if you want to put it up in your house. I like to put mine in my son's bedroom and might even do it in the bathroom too. But these 5 super body safety rules, even though this looks like it's catered to little kids, I think it's also very applicable to teenagers too. So the first is you want to teach your children they are the boss of their body. If they don't want to hug or kiss or be touched, they can say no. We want to teach them that private parts, what private parts are. So a lot of times, sometimes people use nicknames for private parts. And while that might be cute and funny, it's actually not very helpful to our children's like knowledge and understanding of their body. We teach them what a nose is or what an elbow is. They deserve to also know what the names are for their private parts. On top of that, they deserve to know that privates are not to be shared with others. So no one should look at or touch their private parts. And if that were to happen, they can go to you and they won't be in trouble. The 4th rule is no one should ask us to keep a secret, even if it's fun. But especially if that secret makes them sad or confused or scared, or if it's about private parts, then we need to go to our parents or another safe adult. And then lastly, reminding our children that they have a body safety circle. So if they, for some reason, can't talk to you that day or they can't get to you fast enough, or if they see someone else in their body safety circle, for example, at school, they can go to them. Really, the people in our body safety circle, they could be a teacher, they could be a coach, a grandparent, things of that nature. So really the whole goal of this is to be truthful with our children because they deserve truth, and to love them and to support them and help them know that they deserve all the goodness. We want to talk about autonomy, consent, and respect with our children. We want to model that as well. So here's some examples of how you can do that with your children depending on their age. Feel free to screenshot this as well. I'll just go through a few of them due to time. But with our littles and middles, we want to teach these concepts by closing the doors during the bathroom. And of course, some of our little kids might still need some help, so you can tell them when you're ready, I can come back in and let me know. I think I've talked about a few of those other ones for the littles and middles. So we'll go to adolescence. We've talked about how devices are just such a big thing, and so is the internet. So I really think that the first thing that you can discuss with adolescents about devices and the internet is that their online decisions really do affect real life. I think our children don't understand sometimes that behind the screen there is another person. And so we need to help our children first understand before they do have access to a device that they are engaging with real people, and how they talk or how others talk to them do have consequences and can be harmful depending on what it is. If conversations on a device feel secretive, they're probably not safe. And even though it's hard and your child might not love it, it's okay as the parent to take away the phone if needed and look into what is so secretive and concerning. Consider the rule no devices behind a closed door. I know that's not a popular one for kids. As a teenager, I didn't like that rule either. But it really, really is important to ensure supervision with these devices. I think I might skip this, but I will touch on, we have downloadable coloring sheets, and this might be really helpful for your little kids. If they're like my child, they don't sit still when I'm talking to them. And so having something to color can be really helpful when you're teaching them concepts such as privacy. So feel free to go to our website and download these.
I'm putting the links in the chat too, Natalie, while we go along.
Love it. That's so great. Okay, we're getting close to turning the time over to Adrian, but I do want to talk about a body safety check-in. So this is super cool, another fun concept. You want your children to feel safe coming to you. You want your home to be an open atmosphere where they can talk to you about anything and everything. Sometimes it can be hard to get our children to talk. So a body safety check-in is a time where it's just you and your child. This could be bedtime, bath time, or in the car, where you can initiate an open-ended conversation and ask them about their day, especially if they weren't with you. So a great starting line is tell me about. Tell me about da 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 da. That does not yield a yes or no answer because that's an open-ended way to ask a question. So tell me about the best part of your day. Tell me about something you saw that you want to talk about. As you can see, this is an open-ended question that will help them understand what you're asking, and they should give you a little more information than just a yes or a no. On the next slide, we have some more questions that you can ask depending on your child's age. I know for me as a parent, it's helpful to have concrete examples, so that's why we put this slide together. So feel free to screenshot or take some notes. And tonight, if you have some one-on-one time with your child, ask them some of these questions. And if all else fails, say, tell me about that. And that can get them to open up. Adrian, did you have a thought?
Nope, I'm good. That's awesome. I mean, I've said before too, these body safety check-in, and I don't say to my kids, hey, we're gonna have a body safety check-in. Like Natalie said, it's really a conversation. Kids really love to talk at bedtime. Anything they can do to extend going to sleep. And what I've noticed with my kids too, a lot of times they bottle things up until bedtime, and that's when things come out. So I've had some really great conversations with my kids, and they have disclose things to me that they needed to tell me that I needed to know about. So this is really one of the key ways I think us as parents build that relationship, keep that bond strong, and really give kids an opportunity to be listened to without fear of how we're going to respond. And I think that's, the key thing about this too, is that it should be natural, it should be supportive because kids are learning, this is their first time on planet Earth, just like ours, and they're navigating lots of challenging things. So we shouldn't expect them to be perfect or that everything is always going to go the way we want it to go, but we can guide them through those moments so that we're a partner with them. They can come to us when things are hard, not avoid us. So,
Yeah, so true. Now, Adrian, due to time, do you want me to go through these slides
well,
or?
you know what? Why don't I can probably buzz through them pretty quickly.
Okay, sounds
Um,
good.
So, when it comes to child safety, we definitely want to make sure that we're partnering with the organizations and the people that we trust with their kids. So, speaking with the leadership before we sign our child up for a program or even after we have because you've took this training and you want to get some information about how do they prioritize safety, how do they train staff, how do they vet people, how do they incorporate this into messaging for the staff, for volunteers as well, and for the children that they work with. Really give them an opportunity to explain to you what it is that they do. If you feel like there's more that they should be doing, which is going to be the case a lot of the times, we can absolutely recommend trainings and resources to those organizations, a lot of times that are free to help improve safety within those organizations. But anytime we're allowing other people to be responsible for our kids, that also means we have to take responsibility to ensure that they're doing the most that they can for our kids. So this is another way we build that confidence by having these conversations. Here is a list of some questions that we can be asking the people that we entrust our kids with. A lot of times I will just point out one of the big things is bathrooms. We're talking about kids going back to school for a new school year. And if your child is in kindergarten or preschool, they might not be used to situations where they're sharing bathrooms with other people. And that's a place where inappropriate things can happen, maybe not abusive, but inappropriate, and it can confuse kids and break down boundaries. So really addressing with the school or the organization how they handle bathroom breaks, and also the use of cell phones by staff also increases the risk of abuse being perpetrated. I've seen too many stories come through the news about how they have used cell phones in bathrooms or just one-on-one time with kids to take images of children and share those with other people. But we're more than happy if you want to take a screenshot of this, or we can send it to you later. There's a lot of great information out there to give you the confidence to be asking the right questions.
And one thing I'd like to add is I've emailed these questions before I've had a conversation with a principal. So if you're feeling nervous about asking them and getting those words out of your mouth, there's no shame in first sending an email before a follow-up conversation.
Mhm. So now when we're talking about secondary prevention, and I mentioned this before, secondary prevention is stopping abuse that has already occurred. So we want a child to make a disclosure, or we want to discover a situation and be prepared to handle that situation. So when we're talking about kids who have experienced sexual abuse, there is no particular way that a child is going to respond. It actually is a spectrum and it can swing from both ways. Some children can lose interest in the things that they enjoy. Some children can become obsessive about those things because it's a way for them to process that stress. Of course, kids can be depressed. Sometimes they can act extremely happy all the time and it's like they're perfect. But if you see a child that has a change in behavior, if all of a sudden you notice something just doesn't feel right, pay attention to that. Don't just suppress that. Think about like what's going on. I myself as a mom, so many times my kids have been sick and I'm going, what is wrong with them? They're acting so weird today. And then by the end of the day, I realized that they were coming down with a fever and a sore throat. And it's like every time it would surprise me. So, paying attention to our kids because no one knows our kids better than us. So sometimes some of the things that they can do is they can act out with anger or anxiety. They can become obsessive, or they might start complaining that their stomach hurts or their head hurts. They're sleeping a lot, or they're not sleeping. Just pay attention to those things, and that might be the trigger to have a conversation with them or think about where has my child been, what kind of situations am I have my child been in? Maybe they went to summer camp, or maybe they've been spending a lot of time over a friend's house. You might want to start digging, and getting a little bit more information, not interrogating, but creating more opportunity to have conversations and also remind them about what's appropriate behaviors and just say to them, I just want to make sure you know that this is something that's not appropriate and that you should always come to tell me. And of course, I mean, depending on the age of your child, but the younger the child, the more knowledge that they have about sex or sexual behaviors, that's definitely a red flag that we should be picking up on. But again, at the bottom we have there, some children might show no signs of all. I would say as a child, I did not show any signs of sexual abuse that anyone would have picked up on. I think I did a really good job of portraying myself as a perfectly happy, normal kid that no one would have thought, oh yeah, that happened to Adrian. So some red flag behaviors, and I know people love to focus on this because, of course, we want to be able to prevent something from happening, but that doesn't mean it's always going to be there. So don't anticipate red flags abounding if there's a situation where someone's seeking to sexually abuse a child. However, if you see these, you definitely want to pay more attention and potentially intervene. So an adult or a teen that wants to spend more time with children than their own peers, people who are overly affectionate or touchy with kids, they tickle them, they're putting their hands on them, because that can be another way to desensitize a child to touch. Someone who seems really eager to gain the trust or love with a single parent, a lot of the times, to be perfectly honest, or a family. If there's a family going through a crisis, like someone has cancer or something like that, there's some kind of stress, and someone comes in, it's like, I'll help, I'm here, I'm the hero. Not that that isn't a good thing, because of course that's what good people do, but people who want to exploit opportunities will also portray themselves as good people. So sometimes someone from the outside might see it more clearly than someone who's living in that situation. So we've heard from people who said, I had to speak up because my niece or my nephew was in this situation and it just didn't feel right to me. I saw something that they didn't see because they were under stress. And so it's important for us to be educated, not just for our own self, but for the sake of others as well. And of course, people who are seeking opportunities to be alone with children, or they initiate private conversations with children, or they target certain children and treat them specially and give them things that they're not giving other children. Someone that's trying to just make themselves, special in the eyes of that child. Things to pay attention to. And so this is really part of this bigger thing called grooming. And we are not going to really get into this too much, but this is the process of how a perpetrator will establish trust and gain access and put themselves in a position of authority. And the interesting thing is a lot of times this happens to the adults before they target the child. A lot of people focus on, oh, someone might groom my child. a lot of times they're grooming the adults around them. They come off as someone who's very professional. If we look at the Larry Nassar type of situation, very authoritative. He had plenty of access. He was on a pedestal. And one of the things I say is people don't belong on pedestals. So everybody can fall, everybody can err. No one is beyond the suspicion of potential sexual abuse. But through that, that is how they gain trust. They become intimate with a child. Secrecy builds a bond that keeps them away from that bond with their parents. And that's how they gain control with children. So it's important for us to think about how that might affect us. But also, as the children get older, especially when they're, 8, 9, 10, up 12, start talking to them about this is how some people behave because they are not in our immediate sight as much as they were when they were little. And this might be something that could happen in their lives. And so I talk to my kids a lot about assessing the behaviors of other people and trying to assess what their intentions might be. And so we have a couple sheets on our website. This is also under the free downloads page, but preparing for disclosure is really one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids. Even if it isn't sexual abuse, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's they were drinking underage or they did something that was just really beyond what you ever thought they would do. It's really important to stay calm and to listen because our first goal is to support that child and help them work through the situation. We don't want them to feel like they're in so much trouble that they're going to regret telling us because a lot of kids do retract disclosures because they feel like, oh no, this has been a complete disaster. I don't want to continue to go through this anymore. But so something definitely for parents to learn about. We've had parents reach out and say, thank you so much for that because had I not read up about this and prepared myself for it, I don't think I would have responded in the way that I did. So those are on our website under the free downloads section. But some of the key phrases, I believe you. I'm so glad you told me. You're not in trouble. It's not your fault. And I'm going to do everything I can to get the help that we need because we don't want to make promises that we can't keep. And we certainly don't and I'm going to say this with so much enthusiasm. We don't want to tell children that we're going to harm or kill the person who did something to them. A lot of times, people don't realize this. Um, your child doesn't want you to go to jail. And so sometimes I know people who specifically did not disclose sexual abuse because they're like, no, my dad is going to kill this guy, and then I won't have a dad. And that's not what we want. A lot of times kids can be confused by the situation and feel like I loved this person, I cared for them, and now that person's going to get hurt. So it's a really complex situation, but we want to focus on getting the help that we need to resolve the situation. And this is something that's been really hard for me to not talk about ad nauseum. But we do have a section on our website talking about sexual behaviors in youth. And it's something that I would encourage all parents to learn about because we use the term sexual behaviors, but really it means behaviors involving genitals. So whether you have a toddler who touches their privates and you wonder, oh my gosh, is this normal? Definitely go to that part of our website and it goes through this whole gamut. Yeah, Natalie, if you want to go to that typical, atypical section, it really goes through the whole gamut of understanding, okay, this is something that's normal for my child's age, or this is something that is expected, but it needs to be addressed and redirected to something that, okay, no, this is problematic. It can't be redirected. I might need some professional intervention, or this might be a sign that something is going on, especially considering how much sexual abuse is being perpetrated by other children. The more that we can do to encourage healthy, respectful behaviors with their own bodies, with their siblings and others, the better chance we have of keeping our kids safe and also keeping them safe from harming other people. And then from our website again, because there's just so much, this training could be probably 6 hours. This is an issue where we're going to talk to kids in a different way based on how old they are. So how I talk to a toddler about body safety versus how I would talk to a child in grade school, how I would talk to a teen, and also very important is how do we talk to children with disabilities about this issue, because a lot of children who have intellectual disabilities need repeated messaging. They need it to be simplified or communicated in a specific way. We have free downloadable communication cards, which are images with simple messages, to help break down these messages into smaller pieces so that kids can understand them. Because obviously not every child's going to be able to read a big long book or have a big long conversation about things. But as our kids develop and get older, we're going to cater that conversation with them based on their age and their experience and just their personality. How I talk to one of my kids about this issue is not the same that I talk to another child at the same age. So it's really about our relationship with our kids and empowering them to understand something that could affect their lives. So also on our website, this is a list of, and we have a bunch of different resources, but we wanted to put these on here now. And I did put some links in the chat. Stop It Now has an anonymous chat that you can ask questions. I think there's also a hotline that you can call. Mozac.net is a resource. It stands for Mothers of Sexually Abused Children, because a lot of parents, when they've gone through this type of experience with their family, they don't know where to go to for support. They can't just talk to any other parent about what they've experienced. And then in terms of youth serving organizations, Safe Kids Thrive has some great trainings. The Moore Center for the Prevention of Child Sexual Abuse has a whole booklet with so much information for youth serving organizations, and also Enough Abuse Campaign. And then there are other organizations that we work with all the time, like Parenting Safe Children, Prevention Starts with Parents. They have resources and training. So this doesn't have to be the only training that you do. You can absolutely take another training, get another perspective. And then there are also resources for addressing sexual behaviors in youth and adults. So if you're in a situation where you realize that your child needs some kind of intervention, there are wonderful people out there who understand and empathize and want to support and help your child work through that, because it's not something that they're just born with. A lot of times, you can change the slide, Natalie. A lot of times it's a response to something else going in their life, whether it's stress or just they're not able to process, feelings in their body. So our next step for all of you here today that came to this training, and I would welcome you if you have any questions at this moment, definitely plug it into the chat. Natalie, we are like rock stars. It's only 2:03. So considering I kind of gabbed a lot in the beginning, we like powered through. Because I was hoping we could get through for everyone just about an hour. But so our goals for you today is just continue learning. There's just so much that you can learn through our website. There's so many web pages of our website that I didn't even share today. Assess how you communicate with your kids about these issues. What kind of modeled behaviors do we have? Because a lot of these things are going to be experienced on a day-to-day basis. Privacy is a big one. How people talk to one another and respect each other's boundaries and physical spaces. It's something that, I mean, like, I have teenagers and I'm still talking about respecting boundaries and personal space. I'm like a broken record. But if you're a type of person that needs organization and feels better when they write things down and discuss them, definitely work on that family code of conduct, because it helps you just think about all these different scenarios. Every family is different. We all do different activities and have different family dynamics. The things that my family does and interacts with aren't going to be the same as yours. So, if you're the type of person that needs to just process that, that family code of conduct is a really great resource to just get the juices flowing in your brain about how do we want to address these things? What is it that could increase risk within our family? And then work on building that body safety circle, because we shouldn't be the only person our child can talk to. We definitely want to incorporate other people there. So especially if your child's at school or they're at daycare, or if they're at their cousin's house or something like that, we want to be working with other adults who are prepared to intervene, to handle a disclosure. I remember when I was talking to another mom friend of mine, she said, thank you so much, because whenever we have a family gathering, we now take turns checking in on the kids. Because as much as it would be nice to just say, hey, all the kids are downstairs in the basement, no idea what they're doing, but hey, at least we have some peace and quiet. Now they realize, you know what? that might not be the best situation. So they take turns to check in on the kids. And when there's something inappropriate or someone does whatever, having an adult that can address it and say, hey, you know what, that's not going to fly. You need to, you need to change your behavior, or we need to have increased supervision because I don't like what's happening right now. But so this isn't something that parents should be doing alone. We definitely need to be recruiting other adults, whether it's our family, teachers, coaches, um, other people like that, to be supporting us, because it just can't be 100% on parents. They cannot keep their kids safe 100% of the time. But we're certainly going to do everything that we can so that they are safe. So that wraps up our Rock the Talk beginners training. I haven't seen any questions come in through the chat, but you're more than welcome to email Natalie or I. We're always available to answer questions and provide resources. We also have a contact us through the website too that comes right directly to us, and we can respond to any of those questions. But if there are no questions for the training, if you have any feedback too, we'd love to have your feedback. To let you know if there was something new that you learned, or if this helped you increase your confidence about keeping your kids safe. We really appreciate you taking the time to learning about this issue so that you can be a more confident, competent, committed adult working to keep kids in your community safe. So, Natalie, anything else you want to say before we end it all?
I think that was beautiful. That was great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll probably be doing another training in a month or so. We are doing an authors panel later this month with a number of other body safety authors. So definitely check that out on our social media. If you're not already following us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, definitely follow us there, because that's just another great way to share prevention education with the people that you know without even having to have a conversation. Share it to your timeline, to your stories, expose people to prevention education resources so that they can learn about this issue too. So I
Yeah,
want
I
to
was
thank
gonna say,
everybody.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Nat.
I was just going to say, yes, that authors panel is going to be on August 20th, where there's going to be 5 children's book authors talking about their books that they have published on body safety. So it's going to be a really fun webinar discussion. So go look at our social media, like Adrian said, to find out the RSVP details.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day. And we're here for you if you need us.